Hi students, this is Dr. Miller and this is your feedback for assignment 4. This is really one of the more challenging assignments that happens in this class, and to be honest, I didn't see any really great examples of what I was looking for. I know some of you are using cameras that it's difficult to figure out how to set shutter speed and how to manipulate your camera. So it's not easy. But really, part of it is I don't think students are reading the instructions. So this is what you were supposed to turn in. 6 different photographs using the shutter speed to vary the way the action is captured, starting from blurred, which means you have very slow shutter speed, to frozen, which means you have a fast shutter speed. I wanted you to use 2 different settings, one of which was a vehicle in motion. The next part was using the panning technique, and this is where you swing your camera to follow the action, and that will make the subject frozen but the background blurred. I wanted you to try this on 2 different images. And then I just wanted you to use these techniques to shoot 4 other action shots. So this was a total of 12 photographs. Some of you didn't turn in 12 photographs, so that's a problem. All of the photographs were to be put into a document. You can use Word or Google Docs, PowerPoint, Google Slides, 1 image per page. And then you save that as a PDF file. And then for each one of these, you are supposed to put down which assignment your photograph was representing. So for example, when you had the pan photographs, this would be pan number 1. Then for each one, you would put down what camera you were using. Some of you are using more than 1 camera. You might have a Canon SLR, but you might also be using your iPhone. So put down which camera was used for each shot. Then put down the shutter speed for that, the aperture for that, the ISO for that, and then the lens length in millimeters. Now, if you can't quite figure it out, just say wide, standard, or telephoto. So this is what you were supposed to do for every photograph. I really didn't see that except for 1 student. So let's read the directions carefully and follow them. I want to go back up and let's go through these, because normally when I give you the feedback, I pick out good photographs that the students in the class have turned in. I didn't see a whole lot of that, and I never use bad photographs that were turned in by students. I think that just is a form of embarrassment, and we're not going to do that. So let's go back up. What were we trying to do? All right, so the first part of this was this motion capture. And again, using the vehicle. Over here you had the slowest shutter speed, then you had a middle shutter speed, and then you had a fastest shutter speed. Now, as I've suggested, it's difficult to get a photograph with a shutter speed of 1/15. Less than that, it's even more difficult unless you use a tripod. If you are going to get 1 piece of equipment to help your photography, it needs to be a tripod. With still photography, you don't need a real fancy tripod. You just need something that you can put your camera on so that you can make it stationary. All right, so in the slowest one, where the shutter is open the longest, you get the car very blurred. You might also get the background being blurred because you're getting some movement in the camera itself if you're hand holding it. Now the fastest one over here, it appears that the vehicle is literally parked. Okay, so that's the difference. When the shutter speed is set slow, 1/30th of a second, it's going to blur with the motion because it's open longer. When you set it at fast, say 1/500th of a second, it will freeze the action. Now I wanted you to do something without cars, and this is an example where you would just have a stationary subject in the front and this train going by. So you would shoot this 3 times, again, at a very slow shutter speed, and you would get this blurring effect, a faster, and then a fastest. And at the fastest shutter speed, it would probably look like the train here was parked. So these are some examples I suggested you look at. If you have a tripod and you take it out at night and you have to experiment a little bit with this because you may need to change your ISO and your aperture, but if you have a long shutter speed, and again, if you're on a tripod, you might be talking about a 5-second shutter speed, 10-second shutter speed, and that's lights of vehicles that are going by there. So that's that effect when you see that. This is the opposite over here. This glass of milk, I guess, has something that's dropped into it, and with a very fast shutter speed, maybe 1/1000th of a second or so, the droplets of the milk are just frozen here. The waterfall example is classic. Fast shutter speed, you're kind of stopping the drops of water. Slow shutter speed, they are blurring the image because the shutter is open longer. There are some really awesome photographs that are taken with what's called the long shutter speed technique, and for landscapes where you see like an oceanscape and it looks really gauzy and the water just looks like kind of this filmy, blurry stuff, that would probably be where you have the shutter open for maybe a minute. This is what I was really looking for, though. And this is real simple. You don't need a fancy setup or anything like that. I think one of the problems that students had with this assignment is they tried to do too much of this stuff inside. And I know the weather is a little iffy at this time of the year. You just have to take advantage of when the weather is nice to get out there and do them, because some of this stuff is really very difficult to do inside. You can't do a landscape photograph inside. That's out of the question. So let's look at this again. This is the fastest shutter speed, 1/1000th. And you can see that these droplets over here are just frozen. And then as we slow it down, you get more and more of the effect because the drops are moving while your shutter is open. So at 1/15th of a second, you get this effect, and at 1/1000th of a second, you get this effect. That's the whole point of this, is using your shutter speed to capture motion in 2 different ways. One is to have it open for longer, and you get that blurry effect, and the other is to freeze the motion with a faster shutter speed. Let's look at this other section, which is panning. To do this, you really can't do it inside with something that's just a little, 2 feet away from you or 6 feet away from you. There's just not enough room to get the pan. So with this cyclist here, the photographer had to swing the camera in the motion direction, so this way, and follow the cycle. So the cycle looks more or less frozen, and the background is blurring. Let's look at that again with this car. So this is panning with the car, and then the background looks horizontally blurred. Now, again, you have to do this outside. There's just not enough room to get a real pan if you're just a few feet away from your subject. And then I asked for 4 good action shots of your choice. I wanted you to try and use the techniques you learned for motion capture or motion blur and come up with 4 action shots. Action, though, means action. So something has to be happening here. So let's look at some examples that I found. So here's another example of dropping something into a vessel that has a liquid in it that has it has to be opaque, not much light going through it for it to work. And then this was set on a fast shutter speed so that you're capturing the action of these drops flying all around. And you probably have to do this a bunch of times and pick your best one. Here's an action one, and this cat is this is an example of a faster shutter speed where it's frozen, and the background's just kind of neutral back here, which makes this nice. Notice the light is coming in from this left side, and so all the highlights over here and even up at the top and even over on this part of the ear, that creates a sense of depth, and it's a great technique, is a strong side light like this. Let's look at this example here, and this is a berry on a spoon with some water hitting it, and this is obviously a slow shutter speed because you don't see the individual drops, you just see the path of the water as it goes while the shutter is open. And similarly, this dancer over here, and you can easily get this type of shot. Sometimes when you're in a darker environment, like this probably is a stage or something like that, and even when you think there's lights from stage lights, a lot of times it's pretty dim. So you can get this shot even when you're not trying to sometimes. But you can see how the motion works. So that's what we were looking for, and we're going to do better in the future. From now on, you're not going to be doing such technical stuff. I do want you to try and apply the techniques that you've learned, but we're going to be going through some different genres like landscapes and portraits and close-ups, and then we're also going to be starting in pretty soon on editing using software. So that's assignment 4, and good luck on the next assignment. If you have questions, let me know. Thank you.